Yo, what's up, everybody? How's everybody doing today? Another one of my little throwback tales here because I'm bored at the house during quarantine. Hope everybody's surviving. My favorite part about these is the fact that I have zero clue if any of this is working, none whatsoever. So I just kind of tweet it out there and then it goes off into the world. And I'm not really sure if you guys can even hear me or see me or anything. But if you can't, and it starts getting all glitchy like it did a little bit at the end last time, I'm going to re-upload it to YouTube at the end. But I wanted to share some fun stories with you. By the way, I just keep looking worse and worse through quarantine. I put on a winter hat today. It's April. We shouldn't have to wear winter hats, but I am wearing a winter hat. And if you hear someone screaming in the background, it's my son playing Fortnite upstairs with his friend in a tournament. I don't have someone held hostage, despite the fact that it looks like I'm probably going to rob the liquor store down the street as soon as I get off the live stream here. So, but I had a pretty funny story that is one of my favorites, and I like to tell every once in a while because it gives you a little inside glimpse into just how much head coaches, players, people involved in professional sports, as much as they say they don't listen and don't read what's going on, how much they actually do. So we're going to throw this one all the way back to 2012. I'm trying to keep these as old as possible. And I decided in 2012, I was on the Browns beat at ESPN Cleveland, and I decided I was going to write this interesting article, at least in my mind, that I was going to go to Pittsburgh and cover their training camp for a day and kind of see the difference between how Cleveland and Pat Shurmur and the Browns were running their training camp and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, in retrospect, as I pulled up the standings from the 2011 season, this is heading into 2012, maybe that wasn't such a fair comparison. As you could see, the records were just a little bit different in 2011. Just a little bit different in 2011. So, I don't know, but I just kind of want to go see how do the Browns, or what's the difference between how the Browns run their training camp, how the Steelers run their training camp. You know, Mike Tomlin's kind of known as like a hard ass. Is there really a huge difference between the two? So, I go out to Pittsburgh. I get a media pass for the day. I get there. It's pouring rain. I mean, I'm talking straight pissing outside. And actually, you know what? Before I get into actually the nitty-gritty of what was happening at that training camp, let's rewind a little bit to the head coach of the Cleveland Browns at that time, who was Pat Shurmur, who most of you remember probably hated his guts. Most people hate his guts here. Then he went on to be a coach for the New York Giants, and he's also been fired again there. But I got to tell you, for as much criticism as Pat got for getting hired, and as much criticism as Mike Holmgren got for hiring Pat, he really did have a good resume. And there's plenty of things on his resume that made it so he should have been a head coach in the NFL. I can't tell you exactly what those things were, but there's plenty of good things. So I don't think it was the worst head coaching hire in the history of mankind, but maybe this story will fill you in as to why. Because most people hate Pat, I like Pat, and this is one of those bonding moments between Pat Shurmur and I. So I go out to Pittsburgh, I'm covering training camp, and like I said, just pissing rain outside. And it's at a college outside of Pittsburgh, and there's literally like veterans aren't practicing. The young guys are like fighting on the field. Assistant coaches are screaming at players and grabbing their helmets and pushing them backwards. They literally invited me, where the rest of the media had to stand behind the sidelines. There's kind of like a hill on the side of the practice field, and that's where all the media and there's some fans and stuff that stand there. They invited me because I came from Cleveland to come up and stand right next to the defensive line coaches, which was kind of cool because at that time they were talking to me about, I believe it was about Phil Taylor and Ataba Rubin, if I remember correctly, about how much they love those guys, how much they'd love to have them. I mean, they're just like BSing with me during practice. So, it's kind of a cool experience, and I'm getting the gist of it. I mean, complete contrast to the Browns. The Browns, if it was even raining a little bit, they were going inside the field house. This is just pouring monsoon. They're outside. Like I said, veterans not practicing, but the young guys are basically fighting each other out there on the practice field. So I'm out there, and I got some really interesting differences. I'm going to write this article. And in fact, I couldn't, once again, my tweets have been deleted from back then, but I somehow found someone who tweeted at me, and Twitter was able to let me pull up my tweet above it. And I couldn't find the article because the old articles have been wiped from ESPN Cleveland. There's like really, really old ones that are available, and then the new stuff, and nothing in this time span. So I tweeted this out, as you can see, August 17th, some staunch differences between the Browns and Steelers training camps. I'll talk about it with the Hooligans in a few minutes. Bruce Hooley, shout out to him. And so I called in and gave my thoughts on the differences between the two training camps. But I do want to point something out on this tweet. Where is it at? It's right here, right? How do I do this? There we go. Down this way. I want to point out, look at that. Look at that. Still holding on to BlackBerry. This is 2012. Almost all of you had switched over to iPhone at this point. Not me. I held out. I believe this was my last 6-month run before I finally made the switch to an iPhone. Uber Social for BlackBerry, one of the most underrated apps of all time. We were doing things on there you couldn't even do on Twitter for iPhone at that time. But I digress. I do miss BlackBerries, though. Anyway, so I write my little article, and I posted at ESPNCleveland.com. Now, the gist of the article was not talking crap about the Browns. That was not what it was. It was, if anybody's ever read anything I've written, I kind of have this roundabout way of where I make it sound like I'm being more critical, or I mean one thing at the beginning, and then by the time you get to the end, it kind of rounds into a different form. And so basically I was saying how tough their practice was, how intense it was, but also that they weren't really accomplishing anything, at least in that practice, that the Browns weren't accomplishing at the time. You know, being at the Browns training camp practices every single day, you know, they pretty much felt similar to what I was seeing down there. Just one was in the rain, one wasn't. And at least the veterans for the Browns were actually practicing at that time. So, you know, it said like there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, blah, 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 trying to be optimistic about the 2012 Browns team. For what reason, I don't know, because I believe they only had 5 wins that season. But whatever. So it was actually a pretty... I don't want to say it was a glowing article about Pat Shurmur and the Browns, but it wasn't negative whatsoever. Like, not at all. So I get home that evening, I publish the article, and I go to sleep. The next morning, I wake up, and it's about 6:20-ish in the morning, and my phone's buzzing, and I look over, and it's the PR guy for the Browns. Now, I don't want to name him by name, because I think it's a little unfair to just trash somebody who was fired many years ago. But he was legitimately the worst PR guy that has ever existed. I mean, you could talk to anybody who's in the media. He was so unbelievably awful. It was almost comical how bad he was at his job. To be fair, being the Browns PR guy is not the easiest job on earth. And in 2012, it was probably the second hardest job regarding a Brown and doing the PR for them. So I get this call from him. It's ringing. It's like 6:15, 6:20 in the morning. I don't know what the hell. I'm like half awake. So I reach over, grab a cell phone, answer it. And I hear, Will? Yeah. Will, you there? Yeah. Yeah. What's going on? You motherfucker. You son of a bitch. And I'm just getting cussed down. I mean, up and down, left and right. And I'm still kind of foggy. I'm like, who is this? Because it doesn't sound like the PR guy. This is Pat. Like, Pat Shurmur? Yeah, Will, it's Pat. You motherfucker, you're trying to make me look bad. Wait, we run a completely different program to Pittsburgh. I'm trying to install something here. You're making everybody think I'm a piece of loser. Blah, 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 blah. Now, I don't have the best... I'm pretty even-keeled. I don't get mad very easily. But when I do get mad, it's like a light switch. And it's like, I don't know where it comes from, but it just clicks in and the temper kicks in, and it happened in that moment. So now Pat Shurmur's MFing me, and I'm on the other end of the phone. You know what, Pat? You too. You call me at 6:15 in the morning. He's like, I can call you any fucking time I want. You cover my fucking football team. We're screaming at each other, top of our lungs. I'm still with my son's mom at this time. She wakes up. She's in a panic. She doesn't know what the hell is going on. My son's about 4 years old. He's downstairs. He starts crying because we're screaming at each other on the phone. Finally, I was like, Pat, did you even read the article? Well, no. So-and-so told me about it, the PR guy. I was like, why don't you go read the article before you call me and scream at me at 6:15 in the morning and call me every name in the book? All right, I'm going to read it, but we're going to continue this conversation when you get to practice later on. He hangs up on me. Look at the phone, shake my head, put it down. My son's mom comes back upstairs. She's like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. It was just the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And I roll over and go back to sleep. Yes, by the way, Pat Shurmur. This Pat Shurmur. This is the guy that was screaming at me at 6:15 in the morning. And I'm genuine right now, Pat Shurmur. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, so I go to practice that day. And I walk in, and I got to be honest, I'm slightly nervous. This is now... I believe this is after. I can't remember if this is before or after the don't call for playoff tickets thing, where he got really, really mad at me and Daryl for asking questions about. That was the Colt McCoy concussion year, which I think was at the end of this coming season. So I hadn't had a lot of interactions or like tussles with coaches or anybody at this point. So I was a little nervous walking into practice. And they're out on the practice fields, training camp. It's actually a really nice day at this point. And standing over by the media, we all have to huddle in the corner. And Pat comes walking over, and he's like, "Hey, Will, come here for a second." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, here we go. Am I going to have to fight the head coach of the Cleveland Browns right here in the middle of practice field in front of everybody?" And everybody in the media, by the way, has no clue what's going on. I didn't tell anybody that he called and bitched at me that morning. So everybody's like, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Why is he calling Will over?" Mind you, they don't call anybody over to the side before the press conference. They come and talk. Sometimes they'll chat it up with someone a little bit walking back into the facility. But most of that stuff's really controlled by the PR guys. And he calls me over away from everybody else. So I walk over, I'm like, "Yeah, what's going on, Pat?" He said, "I want to tell you something. I read that article, and I'm sorry. I was wrong. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was." And I was like, "See, Pat, I appreciate that. That's very nice of you." And he stopped me there and he goes, "I just want to tell you something, though. I completely blame it on the PR guy." I'm not going to use his name. He said, "I would completely blame it on blank because that asshole told me something completely different than what you wrote. My bad, Will." Pats me on the back and walks over into the press conference. And now I'm following him over in the press conference, and everybody in the media is like, "What the hell just happened over there?" And I got to sit there and bite my tongue. We do the little press conference or whatever. Then afterwards, I'm telling everybody else the story, and some of the older vets on the beat are like, "Oh man, I remember back in the day when Belichick egged my house," or that didn't really happen, but you know what I mean. They all had their war stories of getting yelled at by coaches and stuff like that. So that is my story of Pat Shurmur calling and screaming at me about an article that he didn't actually even read, but that the worst PR person on earth read and told him was bad. And I have a little bit of affinity for Pat, because after that, we had a pretty good bond, man. Like, after you win games, he would come up and, like, grab me on the shoulder. He's like, "This is what we're trying to do, Will. This is what we're trying to do," as he's walking into the press conferences. I felt like I was Pat's guy. And sometimes, you can see how bad a head coach is, but you don't want to believe it because you're his guy. And I still believed in Pat. I believed in Pat so much that when he got hired by the New York Giants, I made the dumbest bet of my entire life. My buddies and I were having some cocktails at his house, and my buddy was talking about how terrible Pat Shurmur is, and my love for old Patty Boy started boiling up in me again. And I said, "I bet you," because at that time, they were about to draft Saquon Barkley. They still had Eli Manning. He wasn't as good as he used to be, but we didn't see how bad he was about to be. I said, "I bet you he'll have at least a 500 record after 2 years." It felt like a pretty safe bet. In hindsight, it was an absolutely terrible bet. And I'll tell you, I'm still paying off that $500 because I put it in installment plans, because there's no way that I'm just shelling out $500 because Pat Shurmur sucks ass at coaching. Sorry, Pat, but you can't do. But I do feel a little of affinity for Pat, because also, in another realm, not only because he was nice to me, because we've both been fired multiple times, and we've both had people say really mean things about us on the internet. Pat, that he's one of the worst coaches by Sporting News. Maybe pretty fair. And I was called a pussy by Johnny Manziel. Words hurt, Johnny. Words hurt. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. I got to get out of here. I want to get you in for Wine with DeWine. What is it? About a minute away. By the way, something really cool coming up this weekend. Probably going to announce it this afternoon, maybe tomorrow, but it's going to give you guys something to do on Saturday night. We're all hanging out the house. We're all quarantined separately, but we're going to quarantine together. Follow my Twitter. Figure out exactly what I'm talking about. Also, if this got glitchy at all, don't worry about it. I'm uploaded to YouTube, throw it on my YouTube channel as well, and I'll tweet that out as well. Hope you guys are having a great day. Don't worry about shaving and wearing pants. It doesn't matter anymore. The world's coming to an end. See you guys.